This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. As you take your seats, everybody's very welcome. My name is Alex White. I'm Director General of the Institute of International European Affairs, and we're really pleased to be hosting this event this afternoon with Gas Networks Ireland. Great to be working with GNI again. I know we have in the past, and delighted to be able to do that again this afternoon. And thanks for all of the work and cooperation that your team has had with our team in preparing this event, which I've no doubt is going to be a really successful, really interesting and important one. And we're at a critical moment, although I think practically every time you introduce an event like this in respect of climate and energy decarbonisation, you can fairly say that we're at a critical moment. We're always at a critical moment in this agenda, but there's so much happening. I think that events, debate and discussion, the sharing of information, evidence-based information is so critical to deepening the public debate that we need to have. And I do admire GNI for, of course, not just doing their core work, which is what you're there to do, but also being willing to encourage and foster debate and discussion about many of these issues, particularly, for example, in the area of hydrogen, decarbonisation in the gas sector, and to see what can be done to contribute to the big projects that we have in this country and indeed in all the countries across the world in the broader context of climate change. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I do see at least one member of the Diplomatic Corps, but the Ambassador of New Zealand. He's very welcome. There may be others here. It's always a danger to, particularly in the context of members of the Diplomatic Corps who are kind enough to come to our events, that I might miss one. So if you're here and I don't see you, you're also welcome. And but everybody's welcome. And as I know, our chair will be will encourage you to participate when the time comes. But what I'd like to do now, before we hand over to our chair, Katrina Devereux, and thank you, Katrina, for agreeing to chair this event. Katrina, as you know, is a science commentator and a broadcaster, a freelance producer. We're delighted to have her here. But before Katrina takes over, delighted to introduce and to welcome Edwina Nyan from Gas Networks Ireland to address you briefly.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. Look, it's lovely to see some familiar faces and some new faces in the audience to enable us to tell you a little bit more about the journey we're going on to decarbonise the gas network. Look, we think tonight's debate is a really important one, and we've some really interesting speakers on the panel tonight. Look, we see our role as decarbonising the gas network as pivotal to achieving net zero, and it's also really important in terms of enhancing and diversifying security of supply for the country. So look, all I'd like to say is we hope you enjoy this discussion this evening and you learn something new about the gas network and the journey that we're on. And I might hand over to Katrina now, and without further ado, to introduce you to the panel.
So much, Edwina. Big round of applause, please, for Edwina and Alex. So Fáilte, Riv Cork, I'm delighted to welcome you all. It's great to see so many in attendance, and it is an important and timely discussion, the decarbonisation of Ireland's gas network. As Alex said, my name is Katrina Devereux. I'm a broadcaster and science communicator, and I've been telling stories about Ireland's renewable energy journey for over 20 years, which is slightly worrying. Teresa and myself were saying when we start saying over 20 years. You might see me on occasion presenting RT's 10 Things to Know About, but it's a story that we've been trying to tell for a while, and the discussions are very important and needed. So I'm really honoured to be guiding proceedings this afternoon. And you all know, and you don't need me to tell you, that the transition towards a low carbon future is not just an aspiration but a necessity. And the IIEA are all about sharing ideas and shaping policy. So today we're really hoping for a fruitful discussion about what it will take to build an indigenous biomethane industry and create that net zero gas network of the future. And this event has been organised with the support of GNI, and we're really pleased that we have such an esteemed panel of experts joining us to take part in these discussions, and they're all dedicated to shaping, a cleaner energy future. So thank you so much for coming. Maybe reserve your applause for the end, otherwise you'd be worn out from cheering for them. But we have Christian Forholt who's a project manager with Energinet in Denmark, Teresa O'Flynn, a partner at ARA Partners, JJ Linton, building officer at Chagas, Caoimhe Giblin, commercial director at Electrorouge, and David Kelly, Director of Customer and Business Development at Gas Networks or Ireland. You're all very, very welcome. Big round of applause. So just light housekeeping, again, put your phone on silent. Our speakers are just going to kind of maybe give us their introductory thoughts for a couple of minutes, and then we'll go straight into the Q&A session after that. For those of you in the room, you can pose your questions in the traditional raise your hand method. Anyone online can use the Q&A function on Zoom, and feel free to send in your questions throughout the discussion if you're online, and we'll get to them once the panelists have shared their initial thoughts. And please do give us your name and affiliation when you're posing your question. And I do really encourage you to actively participate in this conversation, because, we're at this kind of crucial moment of developing this strategy and this blueprint for the future, and everybody's insights and perspectives are really invaluable. So let's get the most out of this event. If you are sharing anything on Twitter, please use the handle @IIEA, and all of this is being recorded, so be careful. Our first speaker is Christian Forholt from Energinet. He is a project manager for the annual report of security of supply in the Danish gas system. He's also Energinet's associated activities country lead for projects in India, Vietnam, and Poland, and a project manager for Energinet's long-term development plan for the Danish gas and electricity systems. He has a degree in international relations and is specialized in climate diplomacy, and has a lot of knowledge about how to integrate biomethane into national energy systems. So Christian, with all of that long, very worthwhile introduction, what are your thoughts in terms of the Danish experience, and maybe how some of that can apply to the Irish experience?
Right. So first of all, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on your biomethane strategy in Ireland. I think it's a huge step in the right direction. And it's funny, when I started working with Padre, David, Karen, and all the great people from GNI a few years ago, there wasn't much, in my perspective at least, a lot of aptitude towards biomethane development besides the people in GNI. So I really think GNI deserves a kudos and credit for the development and to where you are now in Ireland. That's great. I hope also that this will mean further cooperation between Denmark and Ireland in issues related to biomethane, whether that'll be on political level or between TSOs or on commercial entities. That's what I hope. So it's positive to see that the landscape is sort of changing. And when I read the strategy, I didn't read it in detail, but I saw that the ambition was going to get to 5.0 terawatt hours by 2030, which is not insignificant. I think it's kind of ambitious, and as I mentioned, it's a good step in the right direction. Ireland has a huge potential for biomethane, probably relative to its size, one of the largest throughout Europe. And in terms of, there are so many similarities between Denmark and Ireland, both, in terms of size, population area, but also strong agricultural history and agricultural sector in both countries. We also, both of our countries seem to always lose to England in football, so there's that.
Not in rugby, though.
Not in rugby, no. Yeah, not in rugby. We don't play rugby, so. Denmark, last year in 2023, we got to 40% gas consumption coming from biomethane, and that's due to a combination of factors. First of all, over the last 20 years, our gas consumption has been declining significantly, but also we've seen the development of biomethane. We've seen the development of more facilities being connected to the gas grid. I think right now we're probably around 60 facilities in total. And by this year, we're going to get to even more, because we'll have a new subsidy scheme taken into place by Q2, Q3, hopefully. And that's really what has been driving the development in Denmark is the political ambition, having subsidy schemes and having support for both for producers, but also for creating an environment where farmers and developers are inclined and have incentives to engage and develop biomethane.
Thank you, Christian. We'll come to Teresa next. Teresa is a partner. Oh, sorry, it's such a small room. We don't necessarily need that. Teresa Flynn is a partner at Ara Partners, a private equity firm that invests in companies that are decarbonising the economy. She co-leads their infrastructure strategy and has more than 20 years of sustainable investing experience with extensive renewable power energy infrastructure experience, both in the fund management sector and at the operating company level. Teresa joined BlackRock in 2011 as a founding member of its global renewable power infrastructure business. And in 2019, she became global head of sustainable investing for BlackRock's alternative investment platform. And prior to joining BlackRock, Teresa worked for NTR, a private infrastructure developer across several of the group's European and US wind development subsidiaries. So Teresa, you clearly have been working and watching the renewable energy sector for a while. What's your point? What's your perspective from kind of an investment point of view?
Absolutely. So my entire career up to the last few years has been dedicated to the electron. And a lot of folks here, I'm sure, have, grown up in the wind energy sector here in Ireland. And it's, been a booming space for many, many years. And Ireland's wind energy professionals are working globally, leading the wind power space. But one thing to kind of note, the world of industry, which is what our partners is focused on, the world of made things, it accounts for about 60% of global emissions, and it has attracted less than 10% of the climate-focused capital. The big area of decarbonising the molecule has been completely overlooked. So I think there's a huge opportunity for Ireland to take everything that we've done and can be incredibly proud of in relation to wind energy and now deploy that to decarbonising the molecule. It's interesting, in the Gas Network's paper on biomethane, I'm just going to quote this because I think it's pretty powerful. In 2022, the Gas Network in Ireland transported twice the amount of molecules as the grid did electrons. And think about all the attention that the electron space gets. We will absolutely not get to net zero unless we tackle the world of made things, including molecules. So from an investment perspective, quite frankly, it's a historic investment opportunity. And the type of capital that we manage, it's typically pension funds and insurance companies. And increasingly, these investors as custodians of capital for folks who want to, retire with dignity, or, paying insurance premiums if there's an insurance claim, they need to have capital aligned with sustainability or climate-oriented strategies, because at the end of the day, climate risk is investment risk. So you want to be exposed to the opportunity created by investing in sustainable strategies. And across financial markets, the fastest growing allocation are strategies oriented towards sustainability. So then bringing that back to the investment opportunity in Ireland, and I think some of the stats that you mentioned are quite significant. Ireland is in pole position to be a leader when it comes to creating the new asset class of biomethane, and one that I think will, completely take over from the wind sector. We still need electricity made from green energy, from wind and solar. But back to my earlier statistic, the world of made things, including molecules, accounts for 60% of emissions, and it has attracted less than 10% of the climate-focused capital. That absolutely is a huge mismatch, and it can't continue. So from our partners' perspective, we are looking for investment opportunity in Ireland. We want to invest in, developers who are developing biomethane projects. We're looking at many markets across Europe and the US as well, but I would say the opportunity here in Ireland is quite significant, and we're highly focused on it.
It's really interesting. It seems that we could be the world leaders in lots of things. We could be the world leaders in offshore wind. We could be the world leaders in biomethane. We just need to be doing it.
Yeah.
JJ, I might come to you next. JJ Linehan is the building officer with Teagasc, and together with two of his colleagues, he looks after the technical property related issues at 55 locations of Teagasc across the country. He's an engineer by profession with a special interest in energy use. And in Teagasc, where the built environment accounts for the largest proportion of energy consumed at over 80% of the total. So JJ, I know you've got your own biomethane production plant almost up and running, but do you want to give us a sense of how you see Ireland building its biomethane infrastructure?
Yes, thank you. Just to start, natural gas is going to be an important fuel for heat, electricity, and more recently transport going forward. And Ireland has above average use of natural gas compared to our European partners, and part of that is a lot of our electricity comes from natural gas. As there is increasing targets for renewable fuels, to be able to replace natural gas with biomethane is obviously, there should be a receptive audience out there. Teagasc research over the last few years has shown the potential to produce suitable feedstocks for the industry. And the research was started by Pádraig O'Reilly, who was the principal silage researcher in Teagasc. And he was looking at alternative uses for grass. The country can produce more grass than we need at the moment, and there's obviously what was restrictions on herd size with quotas, and one of the potential outlets for grass was as an AD feedstock, and SEI reports have since confirmed that potential. Animal slurries are an attractive component of the resource mix, but forage crops are really the standout opportunity. And forage crops, the typical forage crop or main forage crop would be perennial ryegrass. But more recently, red clover had been forgotten about in the country when cheap nitrogen became available. But red clover as a legume that can fix nitrogen, we see as a very important resource to produce forages for AD. You have to conform to a renewable energy directive, and producing forages without nitrogen is part of the answer. We're predominantly grassland in Ireland, 90%, which is not typical in Europe. Why? It rains throughout the year. We have mild winters, and it never gets too hot in the summer. So we can produce good quantities of grass. But while on a dairy farm, you will be producing 10 tonnes per hectare of dry matter, because there's an incentive to have, to produce milk from the cow. The typical dry matter output is 6 tonnes per hectare. And, on sheep and cattle farms, that's probably the average production. At Grange, we're producing 12 tonnes of dry matter per hectare from red clover. So you can see the potential there to produce more forages, and I call that the opportunity of the hidden hectares. The target of 5.7 terawatt hours for 2030 is ambitious, but the feedstock is potentially there. If we were to dedicate land fully to produce the feedstock, you're talking about 120,000 hectares. And this equates to only 3% of agricultural land. And if you look at producing some of that on the hidden hectares, you don't have to take all, you don't even have to go to 3% to produce the 5.7 terawatt hour target. Of course, you'll be using manures and other wastes to complement that. What is also interesting, if the country has to ultimately reduce ruminant numbers to reach the targets, it's a fairly easy change for farmers to produce the crop, the feedstocks, the type of crop that they're used to producing, just to go to another market. But it is important that it's economically, suitable or economically attractive, because farmers react obviously to that stimulus. We had a grass drying industry in the country, which we had a very substantial grass drying industry based on large units, 400 hectares of grassland. And the output was a protein feed supplement for pigs and poultry. That industry ultimately fell by the wayside because soybean meal came available from the US and South America, and oil was the fuel used in Ireland to dry the grass. And in the 70s, that, you know, the economics just went south, if you like. But the experience would show that for 25 years, grass was assembled at scale on you know, across the country. Those were dotted around the country. So I have no doubt, but if the price is right, farmers will stand up to the mark and produce the material. Just another interesting, going back a little bit further in history, we talk about 120,000 hectares needed to produce the forages. If that was dedicated land, that we weren't looking at trying to produce more on existing land. In 1850, there were 600,000 hectares of oats grown in the country, and we had 600,000 horses. So, you know, they were providing the motive power of the day. So you had land dedicated, 600,000 hectares dedicated to energy. We only have 20,000 hectares of oats today in the country. And if we just take a situation where maybe 25% of the forages would come from hidden hectares, in other words, boosting the output on existing grassland, we're only looking at targeting 15% of the land base that was dedicated to energy production in 1850, and we'd actually producing about 1.5 times the energy as biomethane that we were in 1850. At the moment, production processes of enterprise are encouraged to operate on a circular economy basis, and AD is an ideal example of implementing that approach. Animal wastes are treated by the process to reduce emissions of methane and to provide energy. In a biofinery approach, products like protein can be extracted from forages before the material is used as an AD feedstock, and biogenic CO2 can be harvested as part of the biogas to biomethane upgrading process. And finally, they digested as a biofertilizer. And all those, you know, all those products will be very important to try to make it, to try to get the economics right, because that's always going to be a challenge. Gas will be, you know, natural gas will be cheaper, and unless there's, you know, a stimulus put in there because of the carbon benefits of biomethane or the other products that the other co-products that are in the system, they'll all be important to make the economics correct.
JJ, that's really interesting. I like this idea of kind of looking back to look forward, and also in terms of security of supply and all those kind of things as well. But we'll dig into all of that later. Caoimhe, I might come to you now. Caoimhe Giblin is a member of Electroroute's senior management team and leads their commercial origination and trading operations teams. She's worked in the energy sector for over 15 years and sits on the Council of Wind Energy Ireland. She was formerly Director of Finance at SSE Renewables, where she had responsibility for the financial activities of SSE's extensive on and offshore wind development and construction portfolio. She's a qualified chartered accountant with a degree and master's in accountancy, and spent 6 years working with KPMG in Dublin and New Zealand. So Caoimhe, do you want to tell us a little bit about the work that's kind of happening right now, kind of thing?
First, thanks very much, Katrina. Lovely to be here today. As Katrina mentioned, I work for a company called Electroroute. We're an energy trading company based here in Dublin. We have a very much focus on the renewable sector, providing a variety of different trading services to renewable energy assets, whether that's on the power side or the gas side. And some of our clients come from kind of asset owners who own renewable projects and are looking for offtake solutions and risk management solutions for their projects. And other clients we have are on the corporate side who are looking to procure clean, green energy to decarbonise their own energy consumption. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the company. It was founded 13 years ago here in Dublin, and a lot of the founders worked in the utility space, and they saw the opportunity to create a utility-style trading function to focus on the growing need for that type of service in the renewable sector. The company was originally, Irish owned, and about 5 years ago, Mitsubishi Corporation invested in the company. So we're a subsidiary now of Mitsubishi Corporation. We trade across about 15 different markets here in Europe, and we have a growing business as well in Japan. Our purpose as a company is to make net zero a reality. And for us, we're really passionate about the drive to decarbonise the Irish economy, as well as kind of all we can do around all the different markets we operate in. I laughed when you said I was over 15 years. I think I need to update my biography because unfortunately it's at least 20 now. And like you were saying, yeah, over 20 years in the renewable space. And like Teresa, my focus initially was on the wind side. Like Teresa, I worked in electricity from the early 2000s when that company was really kind of pushing the boundaries about what was achievable in the wind sector here in Ireland. A little bit like the biomethane industry, the industry was very immature. Like biomethane, there was only a handful of actual real projects kind of active in the market. And there was really ambitious people in the sector, but a huge amount to do to get to the point we're at today. But it was done, the pioneers in the sector really pushed and mobilized to deliver what we've seen on the wind sector. Year to date, I think it's about 36% of the power demand in the country has been satisfied by renewables. So, there's every reason the same can be done on the green gas and the renewable gas side. Kind of on reflection, I guess there's some big differences between the wind sector 20 years ago and the biomethane sector today. I think firstly, we've seen what other countries can do. It's really impressive to hear what Christian said about the Danish experience, how they've managed to achieve 40% green gas in their network. And the other big difference is the targets that have been set by government. The government has set, really, really ambitious targets, the 5.7 terawatt hours that's been mentioned. And I think, for the rest of this decade, that acts as effectively a North Star for the policymakers, for the asset owners and investors like Teresa and our partners, for the lenders, the funders, for companies like us as service providers and traders. It provides that, I guess, catalyst for mobilizing to really deliver and drive this sector, this industry. I thought it might be useful just to touch on an interesting transaction in the space we worked on last year at ElectroRoute. We worked with a large international transport company who was looking at how to decarbonise their road transport activities here in the Irish market. They had invested in a number of renewable fueled haulage trucks, and they came to us. So, in the medium term, they'd love to be able to procure, and they intend to procure, indigenous Irish biomethane, but that supply wasn't there today. So we worked with them on an innovative solution to import green gas from continental Europe across a number of different national borders and bring it into the Irish market in order to fuel their trucks. We worked very closely with the GNI team and regulatory authorities across all the different regions that this gas transported. And, I guess for us, that's not the long-term goal for us. Why we were really excited about this transaction was that it demonstrated a real demand on the island of Ireland for green gas. And it shows that, with the right conditions, we can deliver that green gas because it is needed. There is that demand here. I guess, the policy, the targets of 5.7 terawatt hours, it's very ambitious. We're halfway through the decade already, and we still haven't seen the obligation details. There's no clarity on exactly what structures we put in place by the state to support and encourage this investment. I think corporates will have a big part to play, and we're seeing companies like this transport company and other big energy users like data centers, pharmaceutical companies looking for sources of green gas. So, I think that demand is there, but really it needs a lot more joined up thinking by all the policymakers to really get the economy, the biomethane economy going.
Thanks so much, Caoimhe. Joined up thinking. I think they need to teach that in school or something. We need a bit more of that. David, we'll come to you last, but by no means least. David Kelly is the Director of Customer and Business Development at GNI. David has over 20 years of executive level experience in both the private and public sectors. And prior to his current role, he was the Group Head of Customer Operations and Public Affairs for Ervia. David, do you want to kind of come in about what GNI has been working on since after hearing everybody else's reflections?
Yeah, and look, just to say really thank you to everybody that's here in person, but also to those of you that are connecting virtually. You're very welcome as well. I'll be brief. Just two things I want to say, if I can. Firstly, about the role of gas today, and you alluded to it earlier, Teresa. Gas is really critical to Ireland's economy today, and that's going to continue into the medium and long term. To put it in context, there's an awful lot of noise about gas in domestic use. 65% of the gas we use today in the Republic is used in power generation. just under 30% of the gas we use today is in commercial enterprise. So there's a very small percentage used in domestic use, but it's still 40% of heating. So it's a really, really important vector today. And right now we're largely 80% dependent on the UK for that gas, for that commodity. So we have a problem. And the field, the indigenous gas field, Corrib, has probably less than 10 years of life expectancy, if you can use that term with a gas field in mind. So having a source of indigenous, secure gas that's this side of the pond is really important for us. So biomethane is potentially a very, very good replacement for any other indigenous gas that may fall off in time. As Christian said, we've been looking at this for a number of years, and what is heartening to see, frankly, is the level of interest and demand from the market despite the policy. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not in any way trying to cast shade on our policymakers, but it's been a long time coming. So what's happening now, and what we're seeing now around biomethane, is that entities are getting ahead of the policy. They're engaging, they're contracting, they're building. There's big foreign investment coming into the market now. And it's almost despite the fact that we're still debating and discussing where the biomethane should be used, which is good and it's not good. So what I'll say is that G&I, we're very keen to see the advent of a really buoyant renewable gas sector in Ireland, frankly, because it's our vision and purpose to convert what we do today, which is transport natural gas, to renewable and ideally zero carbon gases. We've done that before, by the way. So you may not be aware, but G&I is 50 years old actually next year. And we transported town gas right up into the mid-80s, gas derived from coal. And there was a huge conversion program that took place in the 80s. A lot of the guys and girls that were involved in that, by the way, are still in the company, which is interesting. But we need to now convert from natural gas to biomethane and ultimately hydrogen. And that's something that's really, really important to our company. So I'll leave it at that. And
well, do you want to follow up with that and tell us what do you think are the main obstacles to that? What are the big hurdles that you see ahead of you?
Well, for biomethane, there are no obstacles. There are no hurdles today to inject it. And we're injecting tiny amounts today. We injected 70 gigawatts of biomethane into the grid last year, which, in the context of 57 terawatts, it's very, very small. So is there any reason why we couldn't get to 5.7 terawatts by 2030 with what's in place today? No, there isn't actually. And if I look at the four entities that have contracted now to connect AD plants directly into the grid, and they're under construction right now, they're getting ahead. They're moving on. There's players, and I'll call out one. I don't mean to plug anybody, but I'll call out one who was in the media last week, Neffin Energy. They've established Neffin Renewable Gas. It's headquartered in Tip. It was opened by the Minister for Enterprise, Simon Coveney, last week. They're building 30 plants. They have 6 going into planning this month. That is Canadian pension fund investment. It's €500 million of investment in a sector that doesn't exist really in Ireland today of note. So that's really heartening. And that's why I'm optimistic when you see players like that. And there's others. There's lots of other players that are experienced in other jurisdictions starting to invest in the country. We want to support them. We want to work with them. And then ultimately, we want to try and bring the farming community and the agriculture community and the waste community along with us, because we're all, I guess, learning on the job to somewhat. And we're learning from the likes of Christian and what Denmark are the rock stars in this sector. What they've achieved in the last 10 years is frankly remarkable.
And every time you read it, it was like 30%, 34%, 40% today. I was like, would you just slow down so we can catch up with you? Does anybody want to come back on anything that you've heard from the other speakers there? I have a good few questions, but you might want to reflect on some.
I think it's interesting what both JJ and David said in terms of security of supply, because we face sort of the same issue in Denmark with only having 2 entry points basically for our gas consumption. And that's really where biogas or biomethane plays a huge role, because more entry points means better security of supply. So
I know, because you kind of weep here in Cueva saying you have to ship biogas from Europe and all the hoops you have to jump through to do that when,
when potential is here on the ground. Absolutely. And, it's clear there is that potential from statistics that JJ shared, and, it's untapped at the moment. And I think a big push is needed across the industry, from everyone in this room, and the policymakers, to make that happen.
Just a comment I would make, because there's been a lot of, comparison to, everybody, there's a lot of people very proud about, the wind energy heritage here in Ireland, and genuinely punching above our weight on a global scale. And then as a result, the opportunity for our Irish biomethane, I would say from an investment perspective, the technology itself is proven, proven, it is proven. But the actual, operations of the plants themselves, they are more complex to your wind energy project. Wind energy and solar energy resources fee is free. Here, feedstock is absolutely critical. How you procure that feedstock is absolutely essential, and the security around that. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned that we can take from Denmark in that regard. I heard someone describe biomethane as a mechanical cow, and I think it's a really good way to think about it. You have to be really careful about the feedstock composition and what goes into your mechanical cow, because it can really vary and impact your gas yield. So the variables in a biomethane investment project, many more variables than what we had traditionally in your wind and solar space. That's not a bad thing necessarily. I think what is really important, though, is making sure that you're working with experienced partners who've been through that journey before, because at the end of the day, ultimately the investors are looking for solid returns. They want to see contracted cash flows. What you're basically seeing is the corporates, some of the folks that Electroroute have worked with, they're in the absence of fixed feed-in tariffs and, et cetera, they're procuring the gas directly on long-term contracts, because they see it as existential to their business model, as in, we need to have a secure source of gas and it needs to be green, because if not, what's the alternative? There may be carbon penalties, et cetera. So there's a lot more variables. And I think as Ireland develops its biomethane industry with a huge advantage, given our feedstock position, just making sure that we think through that, working with experienced partners to accelerate and not learn the lessons that others have learned 10 or so years ago. I think certainly a comment that I would make.
Yeah, I know. So instead of bemoaning the fact that we're late to the party, let's just learn from all the mistakes.
Let's catch up and run fast, because we have a huge advantage here.
Well, actually, a question that kind of is around the economics of the biomethane. It's from John Fitzgerald, co-chair of the IEA economists. For example, how much would it cost in terms of tons of carbon dioxide avoided, and how much carbon dioxide would it displace if the target was reached by 2030? Does anyone have those numbers to their top of their head?
Yeah, John Fitzgerald had to ask that, didn't he?
You're specific about the tons.
Yeah, we'll have to revert to him with the specifics on it, because it varies. It depends on where the source of the feedstock is coming from, will determine the level of carbon offset that there is. So yeah, that's probably the best way to describe that. I wouldn't dare give a firm answer to an economist on that.
And is that part of the kind of hesitancy, is just those kind of unintended consequences, or use land use or resources not being used in the most efficient manner, that we don't do it efficiently actually?
Well, I guess it triggered a comment in my mind, which is, I think, hats off to Gas Network Ireland in this regard, because they're connected into Denmark. They're bringing folks to Germany. There's a real desire, I can certainly see it from a GNI perspective, to make sure that as this industry gets off the ground, it's connected into the folks who are ahead, so that we can learn as much as possible. I think in relation to some of those comments that you made, data and collecting it is really important. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were visiting a biogas site in Belgium, and they have the fridge, and they have like the samples of all of the various different feedstock that came in on this date. They need to keep it for 6 months, so that they actually can verify where it came from, what it is, because actually all of that data on the ingredients really determine the price that you're going to get paid at the end of the day. Because if it's biomethane from manure relative to biomethane from food waste, the price that someone's going to pay for that is actually going to be different. So there's a huge amount of, need for proper process and procedure around tracking every ingredient that goes into that mechanical cow.
We have another question from David Maxwell, future biogas. Ireland has a lot of promise for biomethane from grasses. Do you think this could be combined with carbon capture to create net negative gas? JJ, that might be for you, is it?
Yeah, I mean, carbon capture, it's not an area that I'm, I have much knowledge on, but there's obviously technologies there. But the real issue with grass is that if the forages, and I mentioned red clover, if you're producing the forages without any artificial nitrogen, basically, you're in carbon neutral territory. And actually, as long as we're purchasing conventional fertilizer, as long as the Ireland, we don't have any manufacturing facilities anymore, but as long as we're importing conventional fertilizer, the ability to use the digestion as a biofertilizer replacement again has positive benefits to the overall carbon balance.
I might open it to the people in the room. Do you have a question? Will you stand up and give us in your best voice, please, because we don't have a roving mic. No, we don't have a roving mic. Just and I'll relay it down to the back of the room.
Well, thank you very much. So I'm Fergal McNamara, and I co-chair the Climate and Energy Group here at the Institute. And my day job, I work in Davy Investment Bank. And my question is really around the sector and whether and if and when it will take off, because we've got the finance question, we've got the feedstock question, the offtake, the gas transportation system, and of course the policy question. And Repower EU has a 35 BCM target, which is a factor of 10 times. We've got the 5.7 target here, which translates to something like 150 to 200 plants. And notwithstanding the welcome announcement from Neptune David, I'm just wondering, are all the ingredients, technology, feedstock, offtake, gas and policy ready for this sector to take off in Ireland? Thank you very much.
So just before you say that, just for anyone listening at home on their computer, what does it take for it to take off? If all the different factors are in place, what is going to be the catalyst? I don't want to say that lights the fire, because that sounds terrible when it comes to gas, but what's going to kick this off in a big way?
I can kick it off. Excuse the awful segue there. But
fire and all that.
Fergal, like in short, 5.7 terawatts we feel is very achievable. I'm going to say that now. We published, Padraig and the team published a biomethane energy report in September last year. I think you probably got a copy. That we went to the market. It was a pretty blunt instrument. We asked anybody that was ever interested in building a plant, are you still interested in building a plant? Where are you with planning? What's your feedstock? What's the scale of plant? And roughly where is it going to be? And we got a massive response. As you know, we had a response from nearly 200 projects all over the country, bar one county. I won't call out the county for fear that I'll get a backlash. But nonetheless, it was very national. And take it that it was a blunt instrument. Take it that it's people saying this is what we hope to do. It's not what we will do. It came to 14.8 terawatt. So that's a blunt instrument. I'll say it for the third time. But ultimately what we're seeing is a level of traction and appetite that 5.7 we think is very achievable, assuming that you have your funding, which is a big if. But certainly the early movers are largely equity funded, we find. They're not looking for project finance, we find. But certainly it does need a real level of certainty from government. And what was perhaps a little disappointing about the strategy when it was published, and if you read the excellent article from Stephen Robb in today's Farmers Journal, he gives a really good overview of key feedback from key audiences. There's a general disappointment that why didn't the government provide more certainty for investors and developers, like Christian's government did in 2012, like they're doing again this year with subsidy support. So my sense is absolutely there's an appetite. Yes, there's funding to get us going on this big time, but what we really need is signals from policy. And I think that's welcome and it's coming, I think, is my sense.
Any other questions from the room? Yes, Padraig.
Maybe one for JJ. I thought JJ, look, it's a very energy intensive.
Sorry, Padraig, will you just say who you are for other people?
I mean, Gas Networks Ireland. It's a very energy intensive room here, I suppose, in terms of participants, but maybe to give some of us who wouldn't have a full understanding of the agricultural implications, what does it mean in reality for the feedstock providers, the farmers? Like, what are they going to have to invest in, and how are they, and how quickly can they adapt? to providing feedstock or?
Well, just
Sorry, Jay, I'm sorry for pausing now, but just in case anyone didn't hear on Zoom, that's just what is in it for farmers and how is it going to work for them?
okay. Well, just we talked about feedstock supply there as part of our research. We did an simple expression of interest a couple of years ago in the local paper. We need about 60 hectares to provide the forages for the plant. And we were looking for it within 10 kilometers of range, because obviously, transport of materials are, 10 kilometers is okay, but you don't want to be going 50 kilometers. But we're oversubscribed by a factor of 12 in terms of the area to be provided. So that would reflect on, the research to show the potential resource that's there. In terms of what farmers would have to do, it depends on the big plants will probably have the storage at the plants, so the forages would be produced and transported. You would have situations maybe whereby also the slurry would be provided at the plant. I think there'll be different, there'll probably be different designs or different approaches, but in terms of the feedstock, you're producing the same crop as you're producing at the moment. So the machinery, the knowledge, all that is already there. In the past, we looked at things like miscanthus, a new crop. How do you handle it? How do you harvest it? Nothing was in place. And that didn't turn out, as that overall project or overall result for that, wasn't great. But I'm fairly confident that, farmers will step up to the mark. Contractors, they have, it's the same type of equipment. So, it's already ingrained in the industry.
Can I ask what's the experience of Danish farmers when it comes to AD?
I'm probably not the best one to answer that question.
Are they happy?
They are happy, yeah, but it's I think the agricultural sector in Denmark is a little bit different than it is in Ireland. But as I mentioned, when the subsidy scheme started back in 2012, there was incentives for the farmers to really get this going. So it played a huge role. So I mean, I haven't asked them lately, but I'm pretty sure they're happy.
Okay, and in the absence of those kind of supports here, it's kind of slowing progress. Is that what you're saying, David?
Yeah, I think what we are seeing though is some of the developers that are getting ahead of policy are signing 15-year feedstock deals with farmers now, and with co-ops now. So that there is a really decent income stream available for farmers today. They obviously get then, as JJ mentioned, but the digested by way of the circular response. But there's other things that we would love them to consider, which is potentially getting involved directly, becoming AD developers directly, and that's what I think the strategy is looking to address as well. So there's a real ownership within the agriculture community for this.
So a co-op kind of.
Absolutely.
And it's
starting to emerge in pockets around the country, but it's been slow. There's a lot of other things on their minds.
But it sounds like that's not kind of the area that you're thinking. You're thinking bigger than that, are you?
No, and actually I should have mentioned our partners. We already have a biomethane business that's active in Ireland, Cycle Zero. And it's certainly looking at the smaller kind of farms, skid mounted, technology. So it's a very cost effective way to unlock the smaller farms, and signing up with farmers 15-year agreements for feedstock. And, I'm a farmer's daughter from the west of Ireland, so I have a perspective on how farmers think. And, there's a huge education that's required here. I mean, there's been some stuff in the press, I'm sure we've all seen it, where, people can react to something that's new, and there's a huge education required, because the opportunity for someone to have an income stream from, agricultural waste, if that is explained to a farmer in the right way, they're all very commercially minded. And I think it's down through the years, and Caoimhe, you've seen it as well, the farmers that had wind turbines on their land, they're set up for life. They have a steady income coming in annually for the next 25, 30 years. The same opportunity exists here as it relates to bringing the farming community along. So I think it's a win-win situation if it's done the right way.
Any other questions in the room? Yes.
Brian Kennedy, I lead the fund origination business for Electrode. So I work very closely with Keith on the development of our strategy around this area. Got a question just really around the policy, government policy, particularly around data centers and large energy users. I would characterize that as confused and conflicted at best. And what I'm wondering though is, on one hand, David, you're saying that you're seeing some movement in that. 2030 is tomorrow in energy terms and in infrastructure terms. First question is, do you see government policy catching up quick enough? Because ultimately, I think it's fair to say data centers are seen as the stimulus, and maybe large pharma businesses as the stimulus for this economy over the next maybe 3 to 5 years. Maybe just a follow-up question to Teresa. What's the business plan when you go in and you're spending all the money you have on planning and securing feedstock? Is it in the hope and expectation that government policy will catch up with an incentive scheme? Or indeed is data centers and farming businesses the way forward for the medium term?
So is policy going to move fast enough, and what's the business plan?
Okay, a nice easy one. The data center debate is very controversial. You know that it's been played out in the media. On one hand, this economy is built, a lot of it on the tech sector. Those big investors have publicly said they want their data beside their people. They're big investors and they invest all over the world. So that's one perspective. On the other hand, we have a serious emissions problem to sort. So that's the dilemma. And the same is happening, by the way, with regard to the airport expansion, which is also playing out at the moment as well. Both very controversial, both a real challenge because there isn't an easy solution. If I was to say there's going to be an easy, quick solution to it, I'd be lying to you. We've been engaged in those discussions for getting on for 20 months. We're a very small player in a very rich debate. But there's one thing for sure, and I don't want to single out data centers. Gas users, high energy users, large energy users. We're very focused, by the way, on our top 300 large energy user community. These aren't data centers. In fact, they're not at all. They're actually large, high heat industries, drying businesses, food businesses, pharmaceutical businesses, all big job creators around the country. They're desperately looking to decarbonize their businesses, and they can't electrify. So we see that sector. Of course, the data centers are part of that, if you like, large energy user base. But that existing customer base is a really key focus for us. And we're engaging with them directly about the art of the possible on renewable gas. So I'm not saying there's an easy quick solution.
Do you think policy needs to support those industries first, and then you can stick a solar panel on your data centers, so off you do that way?
If I was a politician, Katrina, which I'm absolutely not, never will be, jobs are really important for every economy. I personally like the idea that Ireland is putting its best foot forward to create as many jobs for this economy. I hate the idea of work that we couldn't do exceptionally well going to other jurisdictions because we're dithering. That's my sense of it. So I do believe we should be looking after the existing customers. And I spend most of my time looking after our 725,000 customers today. It's the biggest part of my job today. But I'm really conscious of those high heat users that are looking to decarbonize and just can't with the vectors available to them on electrification.
And Teresa, do you want to come in with your business plan?
So at the end of the day, it's all about the revenue line, right? And that's where I think government policy can just accelerate. Yes, there are corporates in a probably fragmented way signing up today, right? But it's, unless there's a real strong signal from government, we're definitely not going to get there on time. So for you to invest capital, and some people are willing to take the development risk. Some people want to come in when it's shovel ready, classic infrastructure investors like the part of the business I represent. Ideally, you're coming in when your planning is secured and you kind of know what the roadmap looks like, including that route to market. But people will be able to and be willing to spend money earlier stage in the development process if it's very clear who your customer is going to be and you have a good sense of what they're going to pay. But if it's like, will it be data center over here, or will it be, you know, road haulier over here? Like that just creates just, you know, lack of, you know, to a lot of barriers to kind of moving fast. So I guess, you know, your earlier comment, it's, yeah, what's the revenue line? And if you're clear on that, well, you know, I think there would be a massive pivot in terms of how quickly we're approaching this agenda.
Another question has come here in from Naomi Bloomline from the Institute of Public Administration, who's curious if there are any observations or tips from the Danish experience on overcoming vested interests and lobbying from the fossil fuel industry.
Sure. I mean, I think it's kind of similar to the wind adventure in Denmark, you know, years back. There's always going to be doubters, and there's always going to be people trying to push a different agenda. But in Denmark, like Ireland, there's an optimism and a can-do attitude towards the green transition. So I think that's probably pushing the agenda even more than this. And I think it's about everybody, politicians, TSO investors, farmers, and so on, you know, cooperating in whatever capacity they can. Yeah.
So keep on keeping on kind of thing.
Probably, yeah. I think, and what we're doing today is great. And I think what, you know, as I talked about previously, the work GNI has done is really, in my perspective, pushing the agenda in a good way.
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with a no-brainer in a way when it's ticking so many boxes. It's just, I suppose it's what are the next steps forward. Another question for Denmark. Sorry, now you have to go deep into stuff about energy crops.
Right.
This is from Shane Doherty, who says that Denmark is phasing out the use of energy crops for biomethane production. Why is this? And should Ireland continue to follow a grass-based feedstock supply?
I mean, I wouldn't touch upon what you should do in Ireland and what shouldn't do. But yeah, we're phasing it out in Denmark. I think right now it's probably around 10% or something like that. In the future, the limit will be 5, 6, or 7%, something like that. And in Denmark, the predominant biomass is manure, and it will be in the future, even though there's other stuff such as food waste and municipal waste that will play a part as well.
And is that some of the hesitancy in Ireland, is just this kind of idea of like food security and land use? You know, we have huge commitments in terms of rewilding and, you know, changing our agricultural practices, and locking ourselves into still growing grass is something that we're actually trying to move away from, or not? Well,
look, I think the actual quantities, you know, the land area needed in the Irish context are relatively small, and we have a lot of land producing approximately half of what it could produce. So if that was really managed correctly, I don't think you would have very little impact on things like biodiversity, and you could produce it sustainably. And red clover is definitely the crop. Just in Denmark, am I right in saying that the animals tend to be in all year round, and you use a lot of straw? You have a lot of tillage, so you use a lot of straw for bedding, so you have a lot of manure. We tend to have animals in for relatively short periods, and we have slurry systems, so slightly different potential feedstock availability. But Ireland is predominantly grassland, so I think, you know, when you look at the actual the percentage of the land area that we're looking at, it's relatively small. Relatively small.
Would you like to go ahead?
Brian Daly is my name. I'm on the board of the Institute. First of all, I love all the speakers. I thought it was fantastic. My question is, just, I'm not an expert on the topic, but from an overall policy point of view in Ireland, be interested in the panels, or anybody on the panel, view on the interaction between the policy with respect to gas and biomethane, and policy with respect to electrification. So I hear a lot about everything with electrification, heat pumps, better deployment of resources that have to deal with heating of the houses, etc. David may have alluded to some of this in your earlier comment about how biomethane might be best deployed. But is there, from your perspective, the right policy framework in place to balance the agenda between the electrification side and the gas side?
So to paraphrase, how do we reconcile putting a plug on everything with the fact that you can't put a plug on everything? Yeah, so how do we reconcile those? Who'd like to take that?
I can have a go, if you like, Brian. Firstly, there isn't an either or. There's no doubt about it. The electrification, I'm going to say lobby, just the electrification lobby has been in situ for a number of decades and have made a lot of sense and have made a lot of progress. For us to get to net zero, it needs every technology to be considered, and it needs to be seen that there's benefits for renewable wind, solar. We need backup for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. That's renewable. And we need a very urgent phase out of fossil. And there's lots of solutions to achieve all of that. And I think the more we debate about one is better than the other, the less we'll achieve our targets, is my read of it. And I think it's improving, by the way. So what we're talking about here is an integrated energy system. And there's more integration now than there was even 2 years ago in terms of debate, discourse, discussion. I see Jag in the room here from ESB. We are working very well together now, because we have to coexist. And you know, what I said earlier about that 65% of Ireland's gas is used in power generation, and that will continue to grow because electricity is going to continue to grow. I think that wasn't understood, frankly, that even just that message, how important electricity is. But in the total energy mix, oil is still the dominant vector in Ireland today. It's still 50% of primary energy in Ireland. Like gas is only 30% of Ireland's total energy. So all of that debate in the round, integrated energy system needing to evolve, I think there's a much more mature debate taking place now, and there's less of the finger pointing going on and, you know, this is good and this isn't so good, my sense.
Less of the either or and more, we need everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's another stat, but it's from Germany. So 85% of the power in the German market is molecules. So it's like the molecule does not get enough of attention, and we need to have green molecules in order to achieve our net zero targets. You can't electrify everything. The production of chemicals, the production of materials, like decarbonising the world of made things. You look around the room, the electron has gotten all the attention. There is so much more carbon embedded in our daily lives, materials, chemicals, what heats this room, etc. We talked about gas. I think it's just simply been overlooked, perhaps because the policy signals on the electrification side were much clearer, and they have been for decades. Also, I think just the world of industry tends to be inherently fragmented. So the investment opportunity is kind of, you know, it's you know, a lot of investors, they want to gravitate towards the big, large transactions because a lot of infra funds now are, you know, $15-20 billion. We're actually very much focused on the mid-market where you're looking for smaller investment opportunities. So I kind of feel there's been a reason why it has been the way it is, but it is definitely changing because I think people have switched on to the need to sort of broaden it outside of electrification.
Do you see that, Caoimhe? Do you see that kind of it's been less about putting a plug on everything and about actually decarbonising all our energy?
Absolutely, it's going to be a blend, and you know, we also have hydrogen on the horizon as well, which, you know, as that technology develops and becomes commercialized, that'll also bring a different dimension. But it's not going to be possible to electrify everything, but it is a really key component of the decarbonisation journey. But there's simply some processes that can't be electrified that are going to require longer term solutions around green gas.
And do you think there's a prioritization that's going to happen with that, like where those things are going to be just top of the list, knock them off, get rid of your 5%, 10%, that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, there is. And in fact, there's I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there is a hydrogen ladder has been published.
Michael Lieber.
Yeah.
Well, actually, this question has come in from Michael Coyle, who's an IEA member, saying, will hydrogen achieve a role anytime soon in the GNI portfolio? It's going to be like fusion. 50 years, we're still waiting for this.
No, it won't be 50 years. But what Liebrich talks about is the smart use of hydrogen, because it is a scarce resource, certainly for now. And we want green hydrogen. We want hydrogen derived from electrolysis and renewable hydrogen, if that makes sense. Not blue hydrogen, where it's, you know, it comes about from natural gas and carbon capture and storage and so on. That's Ireland government policy. Green hydrogen is good. But the uses of it, and it's a bit like your BEO rating in your home, you've got A to G, And, you know, well down the list of priorities would be domestic use, for example. It just wouldn't make sense. But there are areas, typically, we don't have a lot of them, by the way, in Ireland, like very complex petrochemical processes, really high heat industries, Northern Germany industry, steel industries. We don't have a lot of that in Ireland, but they would be the entities that would benefit from scale hydrogen the quicker. But in terms of the pecking order and electrification, you know, we certainly should strive to get electrification everywhere we possibly can, because it is cleaner. But we've got to absolutely look at the sources of that. There is no point in us, you know, prolonging a coal-fired power station, which we're not, to derive electricity and then saying, isn't it great that we're electrifying everything? It's got to be coming from wind, solar, and then ultimately from green hydrogen. Is it back up?
So I'm just kind of conscious that we've got about 5 minutes left. I like asking this question, but because it's kind of fanciful thinking, but if you were to come back in 10 years' time to us, you can all think about this. What do you think we will have done, and or like what will be the things that we'll have achieved that you'll say, oh, that was a good move, that was a good move, that was a good move?
I'll hope he'd be here sooner than in 10 years, first of all.
Well, look, I'm 6 years. By 2030, where will we be at?
At 5.7, maybe more, hopefully more. It's going to be interesting to see the next few years whether, you know, whether there'll be specific support schemes and specific initiatives from politicians to drive the effort for developing biomethane.
How about you, Teresa? What do you think?
Oh, wouldn't it be great if our green molecule industry, so green gas, green hydrogen, was as big as, if not bigger than, our wind energy industry today? That would be my hope, and it's possible, right? We know how to do it, so that would be my ambition and hope.
Great. JJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I know it's been mentioned that there are plants with planning permission and ready to go, but there is a, you know, a lead in time to build these plants, and 2030 is going to come around very soon. So I think if we do achieve the 5.7 terawatt hour target, it'll be a great achievement, and then move forward in the next decade.
Yeah. Viva?
Yeah, likewise, I think, you know, hitting that 5.7 terawatt hour target by 2030 is key, but that's only the start of the ambition. You know, there's huge scope beyond that. And I think, as Teresa said, hopefully in 6 years' time and 10 years' time, we'll have, you know, a thriving economy all focused on the biomethane, with jobs, you know, stimulating the economy in rural Ireland, providing new revenue streams for agricultural use. So yeah, huge potential. And hopefully in 6 years' time, what will be 25, 30 years in the sector at that point, hopefully we'll have really, hopefully we'll be able to look back with pride on the journey Ireland has taken from wind into solar and onwards into green gas.
How about you, David?
Yeah, look, I won't repeat what everyone said about the 5.7. It's very doable. We're going to do it. The one that I'm probably keenest on, if I look at 6 years ahead, is that Ireland is still seen as the destination of choice for large investment in tech, in pharmaceuticals, in the big FDI investors that are coming here. There was a recent announcement that IBM made about a quantum data center in Germany, and they didn't even consider Ireland for it. And they said that publicly. And that's not good enough.
Is that because of our energy?
It was a number of reasons, but energy security was a key one. And, you know, I think we have done a remarkably amazing job around FDI. And I'd like for that to continue. So by 2030, I'd like for people, if there's any doubts out there, I'd like for them to remember that this economy is still built on the best foundations of our educated workforce, our tax system, our security system, our energy security as well. So that's my sense. That's looking outward in.
And in 10 years' time, we won't be having discussions about it because it'll be an established Indigenous industry that's surviving and thriving, and hopefully decarbonising at the same time. Does anyone have any other questions from the floor just before? Yes, go ahead.
I'm ready with Biogas. We supply renewable gas currently to large energy users. So we're looking at the interim target of 1 terawatt hour by next year, as well as 5.7. And you look at, to develop a plant, you need feedstock, grid connection, planning permission, and you need your offtake. Preferably, if we're talking wind, 10 or 15 years of a fixed price to get built. So should we not call out the government strategy for failing to provide that currently, and probably the crucial ingredient we need in order to get plants built in Ireland?
So do you think government is failing to kind of give us the security that we need in order to do what we actually are setting out to do?
They need to do it quicker. It's no doubt about it. We've been discussing this too long, and I think everybody agrees. One thing I will say, and I've been quoted, and I'll say it as gently as I possibly can. If there was one positive, and it's a very small positive, one positive that's come out of the Russia-Ukraine situation is a much better understanding of the energy system. And indeed, we've all become, as a continent, less dependent on Russian gas. And the flows, in fact, we haven't talked about it today, but Denmark's a massive exporter now of gas into Germany and into Sweden, from recollection. But what came out of that REPowerEU thinking that 10% of gas demand being biomethane by 2030, that's across the entire continent. Our government, because of our connection to a third country in the UK, managed to get a form of derogation. But the 5.7 terawatts still represents 10%. That's still the target. I personally feel that we need to stop discussing it and get on and deliver it. And I do think that's coming. That's my sense. There's more urgency now than there was 6 months ago.
Well, let's draw this discussion to a close then, if we'll stop talking about it and just get on with it. Thank you so much for all your insights. Big warm round of applause, please, for all our... I think, I like the Nelson Mandela quote, when something seems daunting, it always seems impossible until it's done. And I kind of feel like in a couple of years' time, we might be looking back on discussions like this and going, oh yeah, we did it. We got there in the end, despite delays and dilly-dallying. Thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you for your attention and your engagement. For those online, thank you for tuning in. For those in the room, you're allowed to come downstairs for a reception. For those at home, you'll have to just go make yourself a cup of tea. But I hope we won't be having this discussion again. I hope we'll just be cracking on with it.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.